All right, we will begin with Psalm 122 today. And as you can see by the number, next week we'll no doubt finish out the book of Psalms, and then we'll work weed out because it'd be too much to give you, but I hope the study's been helpful to you. Now, Thomas Adams was an Episcopalian preacher, but even sometimes they can say something intelligent. He said, "The Bible is to us what the star was to the wise men, but if we spend all of our time gazing upon it, observing its motions, and admiring its splendor without being led to Christ by it, the use of it will be lost on us." He also said, "As God by creation made two of one, so again by marriage he made one of two." So he probably had freshly somewhere along the line the King James Bible in his hand by his birth date. Psalm 121, this psalm is dedicated to the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The house of the Lord is going to be Israel, and sometimes is rejoicing when they are able to step there. I'm for sure that the peace will be within the habitation of Israel. Verse 7 says, "I am for peace. When I speak, they are for war." Verse 7, "The Lord will preserve thee in all evil, and he shall preserve thy soul." All right. That's 121:1. Did I say 7? I don't know what I said, but I said something. All right. If you get a little cool, it's because we had to, when I come in, the thermostat was calling for batteries, and so the furnace was cooking. So I turned the air conditioner on, so if you get a little cold, we'll rearrange that. It's Michigan. Air conditioners and heaters are known for the month of May, June, July, and August. 123, verse 1, "Unto thee will I lift up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens." The verse doctrinally is named the tribulation period, and all eyes are looking to the Lord to come. But notice the cry for mercy in verse 3. He says, "Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt." Israel is experiencing some turbulent times and cries for mercy. If we want a spiritual application, we can apply it to the saints seeking help and mercy from God during hard times. And I've heard people say something like this: "How come you only call upon God when you're in trouble?" I know it's kind of a biblical theme if you look through the Bible. I mean, I don't want you to take this wrong, but why would you call upon God when you don't need him? I know you need him 24/7, I understand that. But you come to times in your life where you need him more than you needed him before. And crying for mercy is no big problem. The Lord's not saying, "Oh, you didn't need me yesterday, but you need me today." That's what we say. Psalm 124 said, "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now Israel may say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, and they swallowed us up quickly, when their wrath was kindled against us." This psalm speaks of a time when now may Israel say they need him now on their side. Why? Look at verse 2. "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us." If the Lord hadn't been on their side, they'd have been in trouble. Verse 4 and 5, "The flood waters are about to overtake them, and they're not given for meat." Verse 6, "As a prey to their teeth." And there was a time when verses like that bothered me because I couldn't figure out why would somebody chewing on somebody else. But after you read a little history, you get suddenly educated that people eating other people isn't anything new. As a matter of fact, you remember in your Bible where they were killing their children and eating their children. Sounds gross, doesn't it? But then I've never been hungry. Now, I know I say I'm hungry. I tell my wife, "I'm hungry, what do you got to eat?" She takes one look at me and goes, "You're hungry? You need about 5 days without eating anything." And then verse 7, he says, gotta find my place here. He says, our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowler. The snare is broken and we are escaped. So they're like a bird that's been trapped. They're like people waiting for a flood to overtake them. You know, when you get into the Psalms here, there's so much of it, of doctrinal stuff to Israel. You got to be careful. You don't want to miss it, but at the same time, we don't have time to indulge in all of it. Psalm 125. They that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abide forever. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is round about his people, from henceforth even forevermore. So he makes a picture here. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so is the Lord round about his people. And he says henceforth and forever. There comes a point when he'll take back his people and establish them in the land, and it'll be a forever thing. Amen. Do good, O Lord, unto those that do good, and be good and to them that are upright in their heart. And we know, Paul said, there's none that doeth good, no, not one, okay? We're talking about an Old Testament situation here. We're talking about men like Job who eschewed evil and were righteous men. And we're not talking about a New Testament. You're good enough to get by. Paul said, "There's none good that do. There's none that doeth good. The Lord will take care of those that practice iniquity," and He will. Psalm 126. When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dreamed. Then was our mouth filled with laughter, and our tongue was singing. And they said, "They among the heathen, the Lord hath done great things for them." This psalm deals with a couple things, actually. First, the restored nation, and secondly, the rejoicing that came from being returned from captivity. And note the last two verses. We're going to read those. It says, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth in weeping, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again, bringing his sheaves with him." And I don't think there's ever been a missions conference that we haven't heard that verse somewhere along the line. You know, while it's not a mission verse, it will work for a mission verse. If you apply it to Israel going through the hard times, he says, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy." So there's a time when you cry and you cry and you cry, but what you're doing is you're watering down the seed to grow. And he says, then there'll be a time when they'll reap in joy. So what the Christian has to understand is that our time isn't here. We're just going through this journey. This is not our home. But there's coming a day when we've sowed in tear, we're going to reap in joy. Amen. We're going to get on the other side and reap in joy. So if you want to make a spiritual application, that'll work. If you don't, that doesn't matter. Psalm 127, he says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to set up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for he giveth his beloved sleep." Now, let's stop a minute. Except the Lord build the house, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman does it all in vain. When the watchman calls out, if the Lord isn't keeping the city, what good is it? So you need God to take care of things. And he'll do that if you trust him. But look at verse 2. Now, if you've ever needed to underline a verse or highlight a verse, here's one to highlight the next time you're belly aching, okay? He says, it's vain for you to rise up early and to set up late. So there's no point in you getting up early in the morning and worrying, staying up late at night and worrying why. To eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. I don't know how you do that sometimes over the years, Pastor, and I've had some nights I couldn't sleep. I've had some days I rose up early in the morning, and of course the first thing on your mind is whatever's going on. Amen. But he said it's useless. Why? Because I look back at it now, nothing's ever been accomplished by it. Why? Because me worrying about it and setting up late about it and drinking, my pop isn't fixing anything. So he said, he giveth his beloved sleep. Lay your head down on the pillow and say, Lord, help me to get some rest. And then he says this, lo, children are a heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is his reward. Now, I'm not going to get into an abortion issue here, all right? I'm not going to get anything like that, but I want you to see something. He said, lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit, he calls it a fruit. Now, the world says, well, the baby's just a fetus. Call it what you want. Put any tag on it you want to put on it. Turn to Deuteronomy 7 a minute. I get tired of listening to the world change vocabulary. And if you don't know what's going on, that's what's going on. They're changing your vocabulary, a little here and a little there. Hollywood has been in on it. All right, verse 13. And he will love thee and bless thee and multiply thee. And now this is if they do what he tells them to do. But notice what he says. He will also bless the fruit of thy womb. Turn to Luke chapter 1. Verse 42. He says, and she spake out in a loud voice and said, blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Now, in this same chapter, he calls the Lord a holy thing. The holy thing that's in thee. A baby is a baby, okay? Whatever human traits it has, I'll tell you some things about it a little bit later, but whatever human traits it has, people say, well, it's a non-entity. Well, Jeremiah was a non-entity. John the Baptist was a non-entity. We have to be careful that we don't let the world change how we think and what we talk. They don't talk Bible talk. They don't want to talk Bible talk because it contradicts everything they stand for. We're going to get to Psalm 139, but just turn there for right now. We'll get there in plenty enough time, but let me just give you this here. He said, for thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and marvelous are thy works, and my soul knoweth right well. And I don't want to get into any more of it here. I just want you to see that. Why would God pay attention to something in his mother's womb if it was just an entity, just a piece of blob? They know better. The medical society knows better. There's been studies done on reaction of babies to pain and music. My wife used to take the headphones and put them over her stomach and turn on some classical music. And the kids learn to play violin that way. Assimilated the instrument. So he said this, the children are a heritage of the Lord, so there's something the Lord gives you. It's called a heritage. As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. Okay, let's move on. We got some more to say about that, but a little bit later in the program. Verse 2 is good advice. There's no benefit to rising early and staying up to worry over something that you can't control anyways. I've never fixed anything I worried about. It always fixed me. Children belong to God. And if you mess with them, Matthew 18, 1 through 6, if you mess with them, the Lord said, be better than a millstone hanging about your neck and you were drowned in the deepest sea. Now, I've always thought, I wonder what the liberals think of that. Amen. God said it'd be better to drown them in the depths of the sea. And they're loving God that doesn't do anything bad. How could that be? How could they do that? When God tells them to go into a city and kill everything, the liberals are sick. 127:5, there's no shame to many children. Now let me tell you, I did a little study, and quivers can hold different amounts. Practice quivers can hold 12 to 24. You say, why are you telling us that? Look down here in verse 4. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. So children are like arrows. All right. Often they would have more quivers, so they would have more arrows. When they went to war, they would have up to 60 arrows. Now, no worry, it's not wrong to only have a couple to a half dozen children, all right? But you might notice the man was happy. It's not doctrinal. You don't have to hold yourself to that. I'm just saying, children are like arrows, and a man has a quiver, and how many he has in there. You know what to do with arrows? I don't know if you know. I mean, you're living in northern Michigan. You know what to do with an arrow? They shoot something with it. Okay. You're trying to invade the world. You realize that? Okay. Psalm 128. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord and walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thy hands. Happy shalt thou be, and shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, thy children like olive plants around thy table. Say, preacher, I don't get all that. I don't either, but I'll tell you about it in a minute. Behold, that thus shall be the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the good of the Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children, and peace upon the earth. All right. The women of the day of the millennium will be a fruitful vine, and their offspring will be like olive plants around the table. Now, people say, well, how can that be? Have you ever read your Old Testament where such and such a king had 20 children, 20 boys? They were doing what God told Adam and Eve to do, replenish the earth. Now, how do you think the Lord's going to replenish the dust of the earth, sand of the seashore, stars of the sky? He told Abraham that's what he's saying. Like, how would he do that if he has 2 children? Interesting. Thou shalt see thy children's children. So, if you want to make an application to a man gets blessed by the Lord, which I figure I am, you get to see your children, get to see your grandchildren, and I'm getting so old now, I'm going to get to see some great-grandchildren. So, I don't know. I have to get my cane, I guess. 129. Many a time have they afflicted me from my youth, may Israel now say. Many a time they have afflicted me from my youth, yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers plowed my back and made long their furrows. You know who that refers to, right? Mm-hmm. Lord is righteous. He has cut asunder the cords of the wicked. So many a time they afflicted me from my youth. Beat them up, hurt them, made them sore. Many a time. But he said, the Lord is righteous. He hath cut asunder the cord of the wicked. The Lord will take care of it. I said on the radio program this morning, we don't need to pray that the Lord will kill our enemy. We need to pray for our enemy. That's what he said. To pray for them that It's hard to do. You tell me how easy it is to pray for the president. I don't find it easy to pray for him, but I do. I always tell the Lord, I said, I know you know he doesn't have much sense, so he needs a lot of help. Amen. But I don't pray the Lord will kill him, because what would come after that would be worse than what we got. So sometimes you need to be happy with what you have, even if it isn't what you want. You'll get that. Out of the depths have I cried unto the Lord. This is Psalm 130. Lord, hear my voice. Let my ears be attentive to the voice of my supplication. If thou, Lord, shouldest mark iniquity, O Lord, who can stand? Now, without question, the references to Jesus Christ. Verse 3 asks a very good question. Look at it. If thou, Lord, shouldest mark iniquities, O Lord, who should stand? Unequivocally, none. If the Lord was to mark the things in your life and my life that were iniquitous and make us pay for it, we wouldn't be here. Glad you have a God that doesn't do that. Imagine waking up in the morning and you reach over on your stand and there's a letter from God that says, okay, today's the day. I think I'd fall out of bed praying. Psalm 131. Well, I don't know if I can read this entire psalm or not, but I'll try. Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters, or in the things too high for me. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. Let Israel hope in the Lord, and from henceforth forever. It's very practical, its application. Verse 3, I think, is a reference to Israel. Let Israel hope in the Lord from henceforth and forevermore. But notice he says, he's kind of confessing. He said, I've not had a haughty heart. I haven't been lofty and lifted up my eyes thinking I'm somebody. And I didn't exercise myself in great matters. There's things that were too high for me. I didn't pretend to be something I wasn't. You know, there's a lot of men who pretend to be Bible believers. But if you put them to the test, they aren't. They believe about the Bible. They believe things in the Bible. But they're not necessarily Bible believers. Psalm 132 to verses 1 through 10. I'm not going to read those, but I just want to tell you that verse 1, someone is praying for the affliction David is having. Have you ever prayed for somebody who's going through some tough times? Amen. Somebody who's going through some rough time, being afflicted. Maybe I learned to pray for them. I don't know about you, but several times in the last, I'd say 6 months anyways, maybe 3 months, I've gotten a phone call or a text from somebody said, preacher, I just want you to know I've been praying for you today. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I always write back and say, keep it up. Don Green told me one time, he said, preacher, I pray for you every day. I sure miss that. Sometimes you're going through things and nobody else knows but God. I always make this practice. I haven't always done it all my life, but over the past 3 years, I've learned this. When the Lord brings somebody to my mind during the daytime, I pray for them. Because he must have some reason for that. Verses 11 through 18 speaks of the millennium and the restoration of David's throne. Look at verse 17. Therefore I will make the horn of David to bud, and I have ordained a lamp for mine anointed. In verse 15, I will abundantly bless her provision. I will satisfy her poor with bread. That's Israel. Talking about the verse up there, the Lord has chosen Zion. Very rich psalm, and it would do you really good to read some of these. I don't have time to go through all of them and give you all the information, but it would do you good to read through it and get it yourself. Psalm 133. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for the brethren to dwell together in unity. That would be great. It's like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down the beard, even of Aaron's beard, and went down to the skirt of his garments. As the days of Hermon, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon Mount Zion, for there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. Again, when you run into that life forevermore, stuff like that, it's usually a reference to the millennium Israel set up forevermore. You know, one of these days Israel's going to be set up as a nation, and there won't be anybody going to stop them. And it's going to be a perfect setup. He calls this unity like the oil that ran down the beard of Aaron and down to his garments. And I'm going to say this oil ran slowly, so it's not something done in a hurry. Unity is not something you do in a hurry. It takes time to have unity. It's like when you first get married. You thought you knew what unity was until you got married. And it takes some years for you to learn that. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but you'll get it. Psalm 134. Another very short psalm. Behold, blessed be the Lord, all ye his servants of the Lord, which by night stand in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord. The Lord hath made heaven and earth. Bless thee out of Zion. So a very short psalm, millennial in context, but now we're standing in the house of the Lord and raising up their hands. Did you notice I didn't run the references? But if you go through Psalms, you find talking about raising of the hands, raising of the hands, raising of the hands. Say, why would they do that? Well, he's the creator. He's God. He deserves that we should raise our hands to him. He says, lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord. So it doesn't expect you to do it at the work, in the shop. But we're not charismatic, are we? And the Lord's charismatic. You know, sometimes I think this is the kindergarten class.
Mentally?
Huh?
Mentally?
I won't say mentally, no, sir. I'll just say actively. They always want to do something you don't want done, but they never want to answer the question you want. Amen. So is that a hard thing to do? Sometimes if you have bursitis, something that's not a hard thing to do, but that's what he's talking about, raising your hands. Why? He's the creator. You know, how many times we read in the Psalms, and I was going to count that out, and I didn't. I'll go back and get it this week, about God being the creator. And you have to know that the reason why kids are like they are today is because they took away the truth from them, and they won't teach them the truth anymore. They can't teach them the Bible. Somebody said they can't give them a Bible in high school, but they can give them one in prison. Maybe if they'd have gave him one in high school, he wouldn't be in prison. You can have all the degrees in the world and be more stupider than a log. I mean, Brother Don over here, he's read some commentaries, and he's read some stuff that he's just shook his head at. He said, how could that guy say that? What was he doing? And they, you know, you sometimes think, oh, I'm going to see what they got to say about that, and then you open up, and they don't have anything to say. And the reason why is because, again, I remind you, as I have many times, they don't really believe the book. Because if they believed the book, they would believe what they read if they don't understand it. I don't understand everything I read in here, but I believe it. If I don't know who it was, one man of the past said, if I knew everything about the Bible I ought to know, I'd be God. You're never going to get it all. You'll get some of it, but there'll be some of it you'll kind of, okay, take your word for it, Lord. All right. 136, 1 through 7. Let me just read this a little bit here because it repeats itself 36 times, I think it is, or 26 times. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth. Oh, give thanks unto God of gods, for his mercy. Let's stop a minute. The God of gods. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck here, okay? But again, if you look some of this stuff up, these guys stumble over it because they don't believe there are gods. Even though in Acts they get showed there's gods. They don't believe it. And when you don't believe something, you know what that does? That affects the next statements in the Bible. When you don't believe something, that affects the next statement. Because why? Because the foundation is being built, but you tear the foundation apart. Now watch. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of Lords for his mercy. To him that also has great wonders for his. It repeats itself 26 times. Why? For his mercy. If you want to know of anything, his mercy endureth forever. You know why you're here today? His mercy endureth forever. You know why you have any measure of health today? You know why you've lived as long as you have? You can just keep tacking that little phrase on everything that goes on. I don't believe in luck. Never have believed in luck. People say, well, you sure are lucky. No, you're never lucky. That's world stuff. You win the lottery. You were lucky. No, you just had the right number. Well, anyways, verse 4 tells us that Israel is God's peculiar treasure. And if we can match that up to Matthew 13:44, we find there that the man found that treasure, went out and bought that treasure. Hid that treasure. Well, turn to it, Matthew 13. Some of you are looking at me like new calf at the gate. Okay. I'm going to quit going through that stuff. Or else I'll give it to my wife. She can go through it. Okay, Matthew 14:33. I'm sorry, not 43. Well, I lost my place here. 13, right? 44. No wonder I'm in the wrong. I'm looking at 34. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hid in a field. And when a man hath found it, he hideth it, and hath for joy thereof goeth and selleth all he hath and buyeth that field. So Israel's the peculiar treasure that God bought. And he calls them his people. He says there's no other nation on the face of the earth like Israel that's been blessed and taken care of. Okay. So you all know that where I'm at, where I'm not at? No. I don't either. So am I still there, or is that wrong? Yeah. I'm going to make comment, and if it doesn't match it, you just go ahead and say, he doesn't know what he's doing. So the psalm matches Psalm 108 for the repeat of the phrase, for his mercy endureth forever. Okay. 136:1. That's where we're at. All right. And we've already commented on the fact that if it wasn't for that, where would you be? 137. I'm going to read this psalm. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they carried us away captive, required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. He says, how can we sing the song, Lord's song in a strange land? Right. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joys. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, razz it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who shall be destroyed? Happy shall he be that rewardeth thee, and thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dashes thy little ones against the stones. Now, this is the Babylonian captivity, you know that. Probably nothing sadder than reading about how people have treated other people. And I remember when I first went to school, I come across that verse, and I just had a hard time with that verse because I just, you know, you have a sympathy for a baby. I just couldn't believe anybody taking a child and beating his head over with a rock. Huh? I know they do it. I couldn't understand that when I first went to school, but somebody gave me a little bit of history real quick. And there's people out there today, well, you know, I mean, you live in the society where you have news within 1 second from the time it happened. And you know what people are doing. And it's hard to believe. Have you ever tried to sing a hymn in the shop where you work? How did it go? I mean, you can hum a tune to yourself, and you might sing something to yourself if you're kind of by yourself at a place, but during the lunch break, you know, hey, guys, I got a song I want to sing for you. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. It's like everybody takes a break and leaves. It might be because if you're singing. All right. This psalm is as others, a little shorter, but note verse 2, if you will. I will worship toward thy holy temple and praise thy name for thy loving kindness and for thy truth, for thou hast magnified thy word above all thy name. Now, brethren, you just read the verse. Don't change it, don't add to it, don't take away from it, because it says exactly what it means. Amen. And when the brethren run into verses like this, they can't handle them. Yeah. When they change them. If you don't believe me, look them up. And then he says this here, he says, let me see here. Verse 1, I guess we'll read that. He said, I will praise thee with my whole heart before the gods. There they are again. How many times do those gods keep popping up when we're going through here? They are beings. They're not just carved things. The carved things are the picture of the being, what somebody thought it looked like. So they make a statue of it so they can worship the god. Now, I know certain religions tell us that they don't worship their statues, they just use them in aid to worship. Explain the word aid to worship. Why do you think God didn't leave some stuff around? You know, if God had left the originals on this earth, there'd be people having it in a glass cage worshiping it. You say, well, didn't he leave it here? He left you what he wanted you to have, called a King James Bible. And if you want to call that the originals, I'll not fight with you. Lord, help me. Verse 7, he says, though I walk in the midst of trouble, thou wilt revive me. Thou wilt stretch forth thy hand against the wrath of my enemies, and my right hand shall save me. So the reviving that they expect to take place. Look at Hosea chapter 6 a minute. You know, I really think that some people take the Bible, especially the Old Testament, to be a storybook. Yep. And that's how they treat it. And until I did some study and wrote some material, I didn't realize that the book of Isaiah, some parts of it is supposed to have at least 4 different authors. One author said there was 5 different authors of the book of Isaiah. And you read these authors, and here's what they do. They tell you that some of these stories that you're reading were told around the campfires of Israel. They were motifs. They weren't real. These are guys who are selling 30,000 commentaries, a year. Hosea, chapter 6. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he hath torn and he hath healed us. He hath smitten and he will bind us. After 2 days. Now, those aren't physical 24-hour days. Those are prophetic days. So after 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Now, I don't want to get into a whole lot of stuff here, but this is the Lord reviving his people, and the millennial period starting up. Okay. You find the book of Habakkuk. And look at chapter 3. Verse 2. Again, I don't understand all of it, but just follow it. O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known in the wrath, remember mercy. Just to reference the fact of Israel getting revived and going back to their land, and the Lord being merciful. And sometimes he doesn't put it out in plain speech so you get it. You have to study a little bit. You have to run some references to get it. All right, Psalm 139, and I'm not going to take time to read that because you're pretty familiar with it. It's one of the most unusual Psalms. You'll notice the first 6 verses. That's the fist. If you want to fight. The next few verses, likewise, this child, whosoever he is, seems to know what's happening. Thou hast possessed me in the reins, and thy covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Seems to know what's going on. I knew a little girl one time, she unequivocally told us that she remembered being in her mother's womb. Now, I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's what she said. Now, whoever this person is, you say, what do you mean, whoever he is? Well, just read the whole psalm. You see how you're wonderfully made. Well, you start with no bones when you're born with 300. When you start out before you're conceived, there ain't no bones. And while you're being born and on the day of your birth, you have 300. By the time you become a grown-up, you have 206. Why? Because some of them you don't need. You have over 650 muscles, 970 miles of blood vessels, and your heart pumps 2,000 gallons of blood a day. Now, don't tell me that you were a big boom in a tadpole in a mud hole. I mean, you gotta have more faith than I have. There are 2 verses every saint ought to commit to memory, verse 23 and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and try me, and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me into everlasting. Okay? Don't you think you should memorize them? Yeah, that was low. Entire psalm is out of David, Psalm 140, as well as some in the tribulation wanting deliverance from violence and wicked men. Without question, we realize the reference is to the Antichrist. Verse 8, he is asking the Lord not to let the wicked have their desires. In verses 12 to 13, he gives comfort when the Lord will not let these things happen to them. All right, Psalm 136. What is the Israel to the God? I'm sorry. How about peculiar treasure? According to Mr. Thomas Adams, what was it that the Bible is compared to? He was our man of quote today. The star. The star the wise men followed. We only have 46 more books to go, so hang in there.